Hi, this is Roger. Thanks for dropping by. I'm turning my day back to front today and doing orchid stuff in the afternoon. And I've got to go out, unfortunately. It has to be done. And my filming in the morning. So I say the day's upside down today. And I'm going to try and debunk a few myths about orchid care. But it's specific orchid care. I mean, you can do a general care video, and personally I don't actually think that achieves much, because when somebody takes their specific orchid and holds it in their hand and listens to a general purpose care video, they sort of think, well, half of that doesn't relate to what I've got in my hand, does it? So then you have to decide, am I going to do a specific care video, and how specific can I get? Can I do it by genera? Well, some of the stuff I've got in here, no. And sometimes you're down at plant level, and I'm not doing a care video for each of my 180 orchids. So as you know, I divide mine up into sets, and we'll have a chat about that. But first of all, a big thank you to all the people who went over to that Osprey site and hit the like button. Now I'm going to have a pop. I'm going to have a pop at those that didn't. And I'd like you to do so. I really don't think it's a lot to ask. It's important to them, and I sort of volunteered. Everybody took a step backwards and left me standing out at the front. Only joking. But at the end of the day, the link is in the description. It will take you straight to the site. You hit the like button and get on with your life. It will take 10 seconds. Now obviously a lot of people went ahead and did it, and some people came back and actually told me that they'd done it in the comments section. That was brilliant. But you know, given the number of people who watched the video, that I do know, my stats tell me that, a lot didn't. Now that wasn't a high hit video for me. My orchid ones, you know, the proper orchid ones as I call them, they are much higher hits. You know, I get up around 1,000 views for those sort of videos, sometimes quite a lot more. The Sunday chats seem to rocket up, and I have to remember that, because if they're high hits, then they're important to both you and me. So I work on those perhaps a bit more. But anyway, so yet again, it's a favour. Don't feel obliged. But it really would be nice if you just hit that link in the description and hit the like button. That's all you need to do. You don't even need to look at the picture and see what it's all about. They rocketed up really from less than 600 to about 850 in a short space of time, having lost all their details because they had to start the site again effectively. So they had to start from zero, and we all know what it's like trying to get something going from the start. So they're looking forward to getting up to 1K. Now they're on 850 now. That's only 150 likes, and from the number of people that watch my videos, that's not a big ask. It really isn't. Anyway, see what you can do. Just do me the favour. It'll be nice. I've recently discovered that valley that you're looking at on that particular site, just over those hills in the distance is the Mach Loop, where the military jets actually do their low-fly training. And it's always been a dream of mine to go there and watch that for real. Well, how about, you know, a break in Wales that took in the kites in central Wales, the red kites, and then actually got over to the Mach Loop, saw some low, fast-flying jets, and then just over the hills and see an osprey's nest with some ospreys. Because by next year, hopefully the observatory will be open. Anyway, on to this care thing. Right, so we've got as far as the orchids are divided into sets, and I'm not going down to specific plants. But the sets are not necessarily a genera. A set can involve quite a few. Pardon me, and I'm going to keep it simple. Right, care for my Cattleya types. What does it involve? Well, my Cattleya types are either in the holy clay pots with large bark, or they're mounted like these and some others. Yeah, so that's it. As far as the Cattleya types, they are grown in one of those two ways. What are the similarities between those two ways? This is large chunky bark. There's an awful lot of air in that pot, and it's got holes all over the place, including in the bottom. What do you think would happen to a litre of water if you poured it in there? Well, apart from that that's soaked into the clay, most of it would come straight out the bottom, wouldn't it? What would happen if you poured water over one of these mounts? Where's most of it going to go? Yeah? So therein lies, as far as I'm concerned, the main thing about looking after Cattleyas is the ability for you to get them absolutely soaking wet and then they dry quite quickly. Yeah? Now, some people grow Cattleyas in inorganic, like the leca beads or river rock, pebbles, lava rock, chunks of charcoal and rocks, various things, but it's inorganic. I know charcoal isn't, but it acts like it. So when they pour the water through, none of it stays in the pot, or very little, it goes straight through. The bark holds some. So on my holy clay pots, this time of year when it's warm, although I'm blowed if it's warm today, it's a gale blowing over at the moment, I hope the roof stays on. In weather like this time of year, I would go 4 days, possibly even 5, between watering my holy clay pots. In the winter, I'll go 7 or 8 days. Firstly, they're not growing that much because it's a lot cooler, and they like it a bit warmer than my winters in here. And if they're not growing much, they don't need the water, do they? You know, that applies to all orchids, within reason. So the only other factor with the care for my Cattleya types is light. The brightest light is obviously near the roof. That's why they're all on high shelves. Up here, and on racks. They're near the roof. I need the light. Yeah? Right, now let's step back and pick another genera. This is slightly different, but what I'm after in this video is for you to see the similarities, cross those off and see what's left. And then think to yourself, actually this care is not such a big deal, is it? That's what I'm after, because it isn't. Right, Tolumnias. All of my Tolumnias are mounted. So where's the similarity with what I've just said? That's a Cattleya. It's mounted. These are Tolumnias. They are mounted. How is their care any different? Yeah? The only difference is a little bit deceptive at the moment. Because these Tolumnias are in bloom, they're here where I can see them. Otherwise, they'd be up there in the light. So can we now see the difference between, say, the Cattleya types and the Tolumnias? Tolumnias are a branch of the Oncidium alliance. They used to be called equitant Oncidiums. They've now got their own sort of subgenera, or main genera really, Tolumnias. But they're a type of Oncidium as a cousin, I think you could call it, something like that. So where's the difference then, apart from none of these are in pots? If I potted a Tolumnia, what do you think I would pot it in? It would be in a tiny little clay pot with a couple of chunks or something, because they like to cling on to something, but they don't like their roots in anything, and they certainly don't like to stay wet. Yeah? So because these are mounted, the only difference in their care is the frequency they get watered. The light's the same. The fast wet-dry cycle is the same. The only difference is frequency, because mounts need watering this time of year. I'll say virtually every day, because I do get away with every other day sometimes, but I shouldn't do really. I just do. Right, let's switch to... I'm going to switch to Dendrobiums to show why doing a care video is almost impossible. Right, what have we got? This... So I'll just get a few and poke them in front of the camera. That is two or three, I can't remember which, of the little seedling Dendrobium moniliforms that we had as an experiment for the grow lights. They're mounted. That's live moss. If that live moss stays dry too long, it will die, and then we won't have live moss. So that needs watering every day. It hasn't been done yet today because we're doing that in the afternoon. Otherwise it would have been done. That needs pretty good light. Yeah. It doesn't like getting too warm. So as regards as the Tolumnias and the Cattleyas we've just done, most of those like to stay pretty warm. Yeah. This would prefer not to be quite as warm. So a little bit cooler. And not quite as much light. So we've now found a separate set of care. As far as watering is concerned, I've decided to mount it. The mounts all get watered together. I don't miss any out. In the growing season, if I water the mounts, the lot get done. There's no exceptions. It's on a mount, it needs that frequency. Otherwise it'll stay dry too long when it's trying to grow. Yeah? So, difference in care then for that one. In the growing season, it does change a bit when the winter comes along to a degree, is not much different apart from the light level, not quite as strong. I don't like quite such high light. A lot of the Dendrobiums come from forests that have got some deciduous trees as well as some evergreen. And as a consequence, in the summer months, unless they're sticking out the tops of the trees, they're shaded. They're under the leaf canopy. So they're not in bright light. You do occasionally find certain Dendrobiums frequent the ends of branches where there's clearings or like a river valley, so that they are actually in good light because they're right hanging out, you know, in an area that does get some full sun to a degree, but not all. Right, so that was one Dendrobium. Let's pick another one. Ugh. This is my Jenkinsii. How does that differ from a Cattleya on a mount or a Tolumnia on a mount? It doesn't, does it? It's just a mount. The fact that it's a Dendrobium. The only thing that's special about this regarding its care is it's a winter resting Dendrobium. Cattleyas and Tolumnias don't get a winter rest, but quite a few of the Dendrobiums do. So this is going to have quite a long period, given the UK winter, 2 to 3 months, where I hardly ever water it, and it doesn't get any feeding. So this takes an awful lot of difficult looking after in the winter. You practically put it up in the roof where the bright light is and forget it's there. Does that take a lot of care? No. I'll put a picture up of the blooms on that one. So not a lot of care, but it can do that. Oh no, so I've just seen something out of the corner of my eye. I'll film it separately. Now I've got to watch where I put the camera because there's a little secret up in the corner that I want to keep for later. Right, let's look at that one then. Blooms are dropping. Yeah, it's like rain, shake them all off. I wasn't even expecting that to bloom. Now that's Dendrobium lindleyi. Care for that? Absolutely identical to the one I've just put back, Jenkinsii. Absolutely identical. So it's in a set. They go together. Stick that back up where I got it from. There are quite a few different Dendrobiums. Have I got a nobly I can get at? Yes, there's one up here on. Now this is a nobly, so this needs a winter rest, but because it's a hybrid, it doesn't have to be quite as dramatic as the previous two. So this one doesn't need much water and no feed in the winter, but the canes will shrivel much easier than the previous two Dendrobiums, the Jenkinsii and the lindleyi. So this one needs a little bit more water in the winter, but still not lots. So how does the care for this one differ? It doesn't. It's in the same set, apart from not quite such a big gap between the waterings in the winter. Care in the summertime? I don't keep my nobly types in bright light in the summer because I play tricks on them. To get them to bloom as good as they can, they need to cool down in the winter, get the brightest light you can give them, Now, these haven't got light meters on them, but they do have tens of thousands of years of genetics backing them up. So how do you fool a dendrobium into thinking it's getting an incredibly bright winter rest? Is not keep it quite so bright in the summer, because it's the change that triggers them into their own internal changes. So again, if you've got semi-deciduous forests, come the autumn, the leaves fall off of those deciduous trees and the light increases quite dramatically. Yeah? Well, that's the bit that's necessary. It's the increase rather than the intensity that you need to get those things to bloom. So what other dendrobiums fall into a different category? Latoria types. I've only got one that I can get at easily, this one. Yeah? Now, these are in a totally different set. These do not like incredibly bright light. The leaves will burn. Because although they look quite thick and fleshy, they're actually not, especially on the newer growths. So not such bright light for that ever. Come the winter time, if the light level goes up a bit, it's not a big deal, because the light level in the winter in the UK is never that good. I don't care if it's a crystal blue sky and the sun's all bright. It's only just above the flipping horizon. It's not bright light. Your eyes get fooled. So the difference in this one is this comes from a warmer place where it gets a wet season and a dry season. The dry season is the equivalent of winter, but it's not cold. You're still out in your t-shirts and your shorts. It's not cold. So this becomes a problem for me. These are not so easy for me to keep here in this grow room. Yeah? The last 3 dendrobiums we looked at need to chill down in the winter. Chill this one down in the winter, it's not going to be happy because it comes from a place where its dry season is not cold. So this would like to stay quite warm all year round. And if it stayed warm all year round, although where it comes from there is a drier season and a wet season, it won't take any notice of those if you don't want it to. Yeah? So if your temperatures are good year round, your Latoria types will continue to grow year round. They won't stop just because it's winter. But if you've got really short days and you've lost your light, they will. Yeah? So that's an environmental factor that for us in the UK is different. We get silly short days in the winter, where as fast as the plants wake up in the morning, it's time to go to sleep again. So that most of them just stop growing or slow right down. The Latoria types in cooler temperatures will not only slow down, they will stop altogether. They've lost their day length. Yeah, they've lost their day length and they've lost their comfortable temperatures. They will just stop growing. If a plant's not growing, what doesn't it need? Food. What else doesn't it need hardly any of? Water. And these roots on these types are prone to rotting if they get wet and stay wet when they're not being used. You see what I'm getting at? You chuck water in at the roots and the plant's got nothing, it won't use it. So the roots stay wet and that's when they rot. So that's an exception. Yeah. Right, what else have I got lots of that other people would have lots of? Oncidium types. How does my care differ for them? It doesn't. Are we getting the pattern yet? I hope so. Right, Oncidium types. We have, I can't get, I'm not leaning all over there. There's a mounted one. And it's in live moss, which if the moss stays dry too long, it will die. Yeah, so that's a mount. So the care for that is absolutely the same as the other mounts we've just looked at, except you can push your light levels too hard on Oncidiums, and like this one from last year, they will get a bit wishy-washy and a bit pale. Now hopefully my nice new growths coming up are not going to do that this year, because it's in lower light than last year. We've got 2 layers of shade netting this year. We overcooked these with the light last year, the Oncidium types, and I've got a lot of pale, pasty looking Oncidiums this year. But the new growths are pushing on nicely now, and they're coming out the right colour. So that's good. So care for that. Absolutely the same as any other mount. The only difference is this is highly unlikely not to stop growing in the winter, and in the case of this one I've got in my hand, is probably going to be in bloom. Yeah? So it's growing the flower spikes and the buds and pushing those blooms out. So in the winter, does that, if it is at blooming time, which it's highly likely to be, will that one need any food? Yes. Will it need as much as in the growing season? No. So slight little change there. An adjustment in frequency and probably amount of feed. Light level, not as strong as Cattleyas, not as strong as Tolumnias, somewhere around the same as most of the Dendrobiums in the growing season. Right, let's have a look at a bigger one. So I've got to watch my camera. I don't want the camera pointing up in that corner. That's going to be a separate video. Right, that's one of the bigger ones. Now this one has got a reasonable colour. For some reason, it may have purely been the position it was in last year, I don't know. This one didn't go as pale as some of the others with the rather strong light they were getting. It stayed a reasonable green. This has got new growths coming out all over the place. Yep. This is the time on a plant like this that is quite vigorous and quite large, where the expression feed and water well comes in, because it's important. If this gets short of food and water, these growths won't be as big as they ought to be. Yeah, the leaves will stop a little short. They won't be as big, butcher's dog strong as they ought to be. And the difference will be on a plant like this, at that point, could be the difference between producing one spike or two per new growth. And that will be your sign that perhaps if it produced two spikes on all the growths the previous year, and this year it only produced one, it's lacking something. Yeah? Because if it naturally produces two, it shouldn't suddenly stop. Yeah? So care for the oncidiums then. When growing, feed and water well. And quite honestly, that applies to any orchid. So what's the care difference then with the oncidiums? Not as much light as the Cattleyas and the Tolumnias. And feed and water well when growing. Watch your blooming. Yeah? When oncidiums are pushing up spikes, they are actively growing. If you don't help them, they will use up the resources of the plant. All the stored energy in these pseudobulbs will get utilised to produce the spikes, the buds, and open those blooms. And it can leave them quite drained. Such that, when they come to produce their new growths after the flowering's finished, they've run out. And they haven't really got much energy. So your new growths will be thinner on the ground. And they'll take a while to get going. Yeah, so watch your feeding and watering on those. That's that. Do I have any other care differences? Yes, vandas. I've only got two. I've got some vandaceous types, but I've only got two vandas, those monsters sitting up there. Now those are bare-rooted. So they are, as far as care is concerned, they're no different to a mounted orchid. No different at all. So that thing over there with all its roots sticking out in the air, care-wise, as far as watering and feeding in the growing season, is no different to that. Frequently, or it dries, yeah, and runs out, needs more. So care for my vandas, main difference is light. These are highlight orchids. They are in the one place in this grow room that gets higher light than anywhere else. So it's near the roof, yes, but the shade netting doesn't come right across the roof. And over on this end, you've only got the bubble wrap and the polycarbonate. The shade netting stops short. So that's my brightest light area. So slightly different. Now, as soon as I poke the camera down here, we get into a totally different set. These are the cooler, shadier types, as I call them. That's the set I refer to them as. The main difference is most of these come from the montane forest, the cloud forests. Therein lies the blatantly obvious difference in the care. It's the environment more than anything. If you haven't If you haven't been to a cloud forest, which will include practically everybody who's listening and watching, including me, there's plenty of videos about what they are like and the environment. They are shrouded in mist and fog an awful lot of the time, and it's wet, basically. It's a simple thing, it's wet. Everything is dripping wet. There's moss and stuff hanging off all the trees and the branches. It's wet, and it's a lovely green, and these plants come from there. So the main difference is lower light levels, because these orchids grow down near the ground. They're low level orchids. There's no climbing up to the tops of the trees with these. These are low light, lower light, I won't say low light. And it's the humidity that's the difference. And a lot of us, certainly in the UK, if you think of a misty, foggy day in the UK, what's missing? Why is the mist and fog there and not in the next county? Because there's no wind. Yeah? And that's how people get it in their head, that because these come from the cloud forest where it's misty and foggy all the time, they don't need any air movement. Oh yes they do. That mist and fog has formed from warm air coming in from the oceans, laden with moisture, getting blown up the sides of the mountains. And when it gets to that saturation point, as the temperature drops, it turns into mist and fog and rain. It's not still air, it's moving. It's climbing to the tops of the mountains, at which point it blows over the top and it's dropped all its moisture going up there. So that's how the cloud forests form. So the difference in the environment here is that these plants should not go dry, and if they do, for the shortest possible time. So these need to stay wet. So their watering frequency needs to be adjusted. And nearly all of the cloud forest dwellers do not like high levels of feed, and they can't stand a build-up of salts in the pots. They've got delicate roots that are used to almost clean sort of rainwater, a constant supply. There's hardly any feed in that. So these are low-level feeds. I know a guy who grows hundreds, possibly even thousands nowadays, of Masdevallias in his several greenhouses, cool greenhouses. And I asked him once, how often do you feed yours then? He said, oh, I don't. I never remember. Hang on, let me think. Oh, I think I did them about 3 months ago. So that's how much feed his get. Mine get a little more than that. But yeah, so this is a special group. Cooler, shadier, must have airflow. You can see the leaves moving gently in places. There's air movement here, gentle, not a force 8 gale, and high humidity. The humidity these plants are in now is not high enough. It's high enough to keep them alive, but they don't do as well as they could. So that's my only thing, yeah, with those. So how many different types of care have we got so far? I'm not even going to answer. Because if you've got this far and you're still listening and still watching, that was what I was trying to dispel. Is people getting it in their heads that there's lots and lots of different types of care for all the different types of orchids. Yes and no. Yeah? There's more similarities than differences. And all you need to really do, once you've got those similarities and the basics okay, you'll find it's incredibly similar for most of what you've got. Know the differences, cater for them, yes. But that doesn't mean they've got totally different care. The care for a Cattleya is totally different to a Masdevallia. Yes. Yeah? But then all those ones in between, yeah, were very similar, weren't they? Okay, you might get differences in the way some plants get treated in the winter as opposed to the summer, especially the winter resting Dendrobium types. But the care for those in the winter is the more care you give them, the more you're going to mess them up. The more you forget they're there, the better they're probably going to do. Neglect is the care they want in the winter. Right, so that's it for today. A care guide. Was it really a care guide? Yeah. This is what I try and get it across sometimes when I get it in my head that perhaps it might be a good idea. The care is not that different. You know, I come out here and something, you know, I come out here, firstly because I like being out here with all my pretty blooms, but I come out here normally because there's a job to do, and that job will mainly be watering and or feeding. Yeah? So most days I'm going to come out here and I'm going to water and feed my mounts, and they get fed probably 3 out of 4 waterings this time of year because they're all growing. It's their time. And that's the job I come out here to do. And I get it done. On the same day, I might need to water my holy clay pots. They might be able to wait till the next day, but they have a cycle. A number of days in between watering, depending on how warm it's been in here during a sequence of days. Yeah? And then I've got my other types of pots, which is like this lot up here. These are not holy clay pots. That's not growing in a clay pot. It's stood in it because it keeps falling over. So they're those types of pots. Yeah? They're non-holy clay pots. And they get watered at a different frequency. Yeah? And then there's these. They're all in pots. But they get watered at a different frequency yet again. And occasionally I get this so wrong and so messed up because those frequencies are different that I come out here and I think, oh no, I've got to water everything today. Absolutely everything. Do you think I do that? Do I? Hell. Something's going to wait till tomorrow. And then I decide, well, which can it be then? What's going to do the least harm? Damage limitation. So there we go then. A sort of care guide that didn't really end up telling you much, did it? Still a care guide though. I don't do those very often, you know. My Kaniko's just coming back into bloom, I just noticed. Just getting that back into bloom again. It's got a lot of clusters in places it hasn't had any before, so this is starting to use... See, this is the first of the leaved canes that's produced a cluster, so this is one of my growths. Most of these growths down here were there when I got it and have since all dropped their leaves now, but they're still blooming. They still carry on blooming. So this just keeps pushing out buds and blooms almost constantly. Can't ask for much more than that, can you? So there we go then. And if you're still here, down in the description is a link. Click on the link, hit the like button, please. Let's get these people up to 1K. It's not that difficult. And I'll see you next time. Thanks for dropping by.